Life has a way of shaking us when we least expect it. It does not ask permission before it snatches away our comfort, our dreams, our sense of security. It does not whisper a warning before it turns sweet laughter into hollow silence, before it replaces warm embraces with aching emptiness. There comes a time in every life when the world feels unjust, when the hands that were meant to lift us up let go, when the road ahead seems endless and unkind. Faith in such moments becomes more than a belief. It becomes a battle. How does one stay faithful when the rain will not stop falling? When prayers feel like echoes in an empty room? When good people suffer and cruelty flourishes? The heart asks, why must I endure? Where is the justice in my suffering? It is easy to believe when the sun shines, when the path is smooth, when blessings flow like rivers in the spring. But faith is not tested in abundance, it is tested in drought. It is weighed not in moments of triumph, but in the silence of despair. And so the question is not whether life will be unfair, because it will be. The question is, will you still hold on? There was a woman I once knew, strong as the oaks that lined the riverside, yet gentle as the morning breeze. She had seen love and she had seen loss. She had known hunger and she had known abundance. But life in its relentless cruelty had stolen from her too many times to count. And yet she never bowed to bitterness. When the storms came, she did not curse the sky. When the winds tore at her foundation, she did not wail in despair. She stood, her back straight, her spirit unbroken. I asked her once, how do you still believe? How do you still smile when life has taken so much? She looked at me, and in her eyes was something ancient, something unshaken. She said, faith is not about what I see, child. It is about what I know. And I know this. Trouble don't last always. It is a simple truth, yet one we often forget when pain tightens its grip around our hearts. We think that because the night is long, the sun has forgotten to rise. We think that because the road is hard, we have been abandoned. But faith is not a feeling, it is a decision. It is choosing to believe in the unseen when the seen is too much to bear. It is choosing to stand when your knees beg you to fall. It is choosing to trust when everything in you wants to surrender. The weight of unfairness is heavy. It presses down on the soul, makes the spirit weary. You may have done all the right things, loved deeply, worked hard, given without expectation, yet the reward does not come. You see the undeserving rise while you struggle to keep your head above water. You see those who do wrong flourish while you fight battles you never asked for. And the question echoes in your mind, why me? But faith does not always answer that question. Faith does not always provide explanations, does not always come with reasons neatly tied in a bow. Faith says, I may not understand, but I will keep walking. Faith says, I may not see the end, but I know this is not the end. Faith does not need proof to believe, does not require sight to see. It moves forward, even in darkness. There was a time when I stood at the edge of despair, when life had taken more than I thought I could bear. I felt forgotten, felt betrayed by the very heavens I had trusted. I watched others dance in the light while I stumbled through shadows. And in that moment, faith seemed like a cruel joke, a promise made but never fulfilled. But then a whisper in my spirit reminded me of something powerful. The strongest trees do not grow in easy soil. The deepest roots are not found in soft ground. It is the storm that makes the oak strong. It is the weight that builds endurance. And suddenly I understood. Faith is not about escaping the fire. It is about enduring it. Faith is not about avoiding the struggle. It is about learning to stand in the midst of it. It is instead, so I stood. not because I felt strong, but because I refused to bow to hopelessness. I walked, not because I could see the path ahead, but because I trusted that each step had purpose. And in time, the storm passed, the night ended, the burden lifted, and I was still standing. Life will not always be fair. That is a truth we must make peace with. There will be days when you will question why you keep believing, why you keep hoping, why you keep loving when life has been so unkind. But remember this, faith is not about fairness. It is about resilience. It is about standing, even when you do not understand. It is about knowing deep in your soul that no storm lasts forever, that no night is endless, that even in pain there is purpose. So when life feels unfair, when your heart is weary, when your spirit is tired, do not let go. Stand, walk, believe, for trouble don't last always, and faith, even in the darkest night, will always lead you home. Life has a way of testing the ones who dare to love, to hope, to believe in goodness despite the darkness that moves through the world. It will press its hands against your chest, squeezing the breath from your lungs, watching to see if you will break. And there will be days when you feel as though you might, when the weight of your burdens is too heavy to bear, when your knees tremble under the strain of it all, when the unfairness of life settles into your bones and makes you question everything you thought you knew. It is in those moments that faith is not just a word, but a choice, a hard choice, a painful choice, a choice that will not always feel natural, will not always feel rewarding, because faith is not about immediate relief. It is about endurance. It is about trusting in the unseen when all that is visible is hardship. It is about believing in a justice that has not yet come, in a purpose that has not yet revealed itself. And that is where most people falter. They believe that faith means an easy road, that if they are faithful enough, they will be spared from pain, from disappointment, from the bitter unfairness of the world. But faith is not a shield against suffering. Faith is what carries you through it. It is the quiet strength in the storm, the steady hand when everything else is shaking. It does not promise escape. It promises resilience. There was once a man who worked tirelessly, who poured himself into his labor, believing that if he was honest, if he was diligent, if he did everything right, life would reward him. But one day, without warning, he lost everything. The company he had built from the ground up crumbled. The people he had trusted turned away, and he was left standing in the ruins of what he thought was security. He had done nothing wrong. He had not been reckless, had not been dishonest, had not been careless. And yet life took from him without mercy. He sat in his quiet home, staring at the emptiness around him, and he asked the question we all ask when faced with hardship we do not deserve: why? He looked for meaning in the rubble, looked for an explanation that would make sense of his suffering, but none came. And that is the hardest part about life's unfairness. It rarely comes with answers. It rarely gives us the satisfaction of knowing why we must endure what we endure. But this man, though broken, though weary, though unsure of what lay ahead, did something remarkable. He stood up. He dusted off the ashes of his loss and chose to believe that the end of one chapter did not mean the end of the book. He chose to trust that even though he could not see the purpose, there was one. That even though he had been dealt an unfair hand, he still had the power to move forward. And that is what faith looks like. It is not about never questioning. It is not about never feeling the weight of sorrow or anger or confusion. Faith does not mean you do not cry. It does not mean you do not grieve the things that were stolen from you. Faith means that after the tears have fallen, after the questions have gone unanswered, after the weight has threatened to crush you, you still rise. You still walk. You still believe, because life, for all its unfairness, is still moving. Time does not stand still even when you want it to. The sun continues to rise even on the days you do not want to face it, and every step forward, no matter how small, no matter how painful, is a declaration that you will not be defeated. That unfairness will not define you, that you are more than the suffering you have endured. There is an old story about a woman who carried a burden heavier than most. She had lost her husband, buried her child, worked tirelessly just to keep a roof over her head. Life had not been kind to her, yet she did not wear her suffering like a badge. She did not let bitterness take root in her heart. When asked how she remained so strong, how she did not crumble under the weight of her pain, she smiled, a small, knowing smile, and said, "Because I have seen what comes after the storm." She had seen that no matter how brutal the winds, no matter how relentless the rain, the storm always passed. The sun always returned. She had learned that suffering is not the final chapter, that pain is not the end of the story. And that is what kept her standing, not the absence of hardship, but the knowledge that hardship is never the end. That is faith. Faith is understanding that unfairness is a part of life, but it does not have the power to destroy you unless you let it. It is knowing that injustice may come, that heartache may visit, that struggles may weigh you down, but they do not get the final word. Faith is the refusal to be consumed by what is wrong in the world. It is the decision to keep believing in goodness, to keep seeking light even when darkness tries to swallow you whole. And there will be moments when faith feels impossible, when it feels like a lie, like a cruel illusion meant to keep you hoping for something that will never come. In those moments, remember this: faith is not about certainty, it is about trust. It is about standing in the unknown and choosing to believe that just because you cannot see the way does not mean there is no way. It is about understanding that fairness is not promised, but resilience is possible. You may feel alone in your struggle, may feel as though no one sees the depth of what you carry, but you are not alone. You are not the first to walk through fire, not the first to question, not the first to wonder if faith is worth holding on to. But if you look back, if you listen to the voices of those who have come before you, you will hear the same truth whispered again and again. Do not give up, do not let go. Because there is something beyond this moment. There is something waiting on the other side of your suffering. There is a strength you have not yet discovered, a victory you have not yet seen, a redemption that has not yet arrived. And if you hold on, if you keep walking, keep believing, keep trusting, you will find it. Not because life is fair, not because the pain will magically disappear, but because faith has the power to carry you through even the most unjust storms. And when the storm passes, when the winds quiet, when the rain ceases, you will look back and see that every step, every tear, every moment of doubt was leading you somewhere. And you will know deep in your soul that faith was never about avoiding the storm. It was about surviving it. Life does not ask for permission before it takes. It does not pause to consider whether you have already endured enough, whether your heart has already been bruised too many times. It moves without mercy, stripping away comforts, unraveling certainties, leaving you to wonder how you will make it through. It is easy to be faithful when the road is smooth, when prayers are answered quickly, when blessings come in steady streams. But when life turns its back on you, when your cries seem to echo into silence, when the unfairness of it all presses against your chest like a weight too heavy to carry, that is when faith is tested. That is when you must decide if you will hold on or let go. There was a young woman who knew what it meant to suffer. She had worked hard, done everything right, poured herself into her dreams with the belief that good things would come if she remained faithful. But life did not reward her efforts. Instead, it stripped her bare. She lost her job. She lost her home. She lost the people she thought would stand beside her when the storms came. And as she sat alone, staring at the wreckage of all she had built, she felt something she had never known before: presentment. She had been taught that faithfulness would bring favor, that goodness would be met with goodness. But now, as she sat in the ruins of her life, she wondered if it had all been a lie. She wanted to walk away from faith, to let go of the belief that had once carried her, and yet something deep within her refused. It was not logic, it was not reason. It was something unshaken, something quiet yet unmovable. It was the voice of those who had come before her, whispering that faith is not a bargain, not a trade. It is not a transaction where righteousness ensures reward. Faith is what keeps you standing when the rewards do not come, when the blessings do not flow, when life is nothing but questions with no answers. She did not feel strong. She did not feel hopeful, but she decided to keep moving, even in her weariness, even in her doubt. She chose to keep believing that this was not the end of her story. And in time, though the road remained difficult, she began to see what faith had given her. It had not removed her pain, had not erased her struggles, but it had given her the strength to endure. And endurance, she realized, was more powerful than any temporary relief. It is tempting to believe that faith is about avoiding hardship, about securing a life free from struggle. But faith is not an escape. It is a foundation. It is what keeps you rooted when everything around you is shaking. It is what keeps you from crumbling under the weight of disappointment. It is what carries you forward when all you want to do is stop. There's an old story about a farmer who worked the land with tireless hands. He planted his crops with care, tended to them with patience, waited for the harvest with expectation. But a storm came. A flood swept through the fields, destroying everything he had labored for. He stood before the wreckage, his hands empty, his efforts washed away in a moment. And the people in the village pitied him, said it was unfair, said he had every right to be bitter. But the farmer did not curse the heavens. He did not wail in despair. Instead, he bent down, ran his fingers through the damp soil, and said, "The land is still here. My hands still work. I will plant again." And that is faith. It is not about pretending that the storm did not come, not about denying the pain of loss. It is about seeing that even when life takes, there is still something left. That even when all seems lost, there is still ground to stand on, still hands to work, still breath in your lungs. There will be days when faith feels impossible, when the weight of unfairness makes you want to stop believing. There will be moments when you will question whether it is worth it to keep trusting, to keep hoping, to keep holding on. And in those moments, remember this: faith is not about never doubting. It is about never surrendering to doubt. It is about knowing that questions will come, that hardships will arise, that unfairness will visit, but they do not get to write the final chapter. There was a woman who had lived long enough to see joy and sorrow, to witness both kindness and cruelty. She had buried loved ones, had known hunger, had walked through valleys so dark that she thought she would never find her way out. But she had also seen the sunrise after the longest nights. She had seen laughter return to lips that had known only grief. She had seen healing come in ways she never expected. And when asked how she had managed to hold on to faith through all she had endured, she simply said, "Because I have seen what happens when you don't let go." She had seen people give in to bitterness, had watched them let unfairness harden their hearts, steal their joy, strip them of the ability to love, and she had refused to let that be her story. She had chosen faith not because it had made life easy, but because it had made her strong, because it had given her a reason to keep going, even when there seemed to be no reason at all. Life is not fair. That is a truth you must accept. But unfairness is not the end of the story. It is merely a chapter. And you, no matter what you have faced, no matter what has been taken from you, still have the power to turn the page. There will be moments when you do not feel like believing, when faith seems like an impossible burden to carry. But faith is not about how you feel. It is about what you choose. And when you choose to keep walking, to keep trusting, to keep believing that this is not the end, you will find something remarkable. You will find that you are stronger than you thought, that you can endure more than you imagine, that even in the midst of suffering, there is still something worth holding on to. The world will not always be kind to you. There will be losses that shake you, betrayals that wound you, struggles that threaten to break you. But there is something within you that cannot be taken, something that no unfairness can steal. It is the choice to rise, the choice to stand, the choice to keep believing, even when everything in you wants to let go. And if you can do that, if you can hold on to faith, even when life feels unbearable, you will come to see what so many before you have seen, that trouble does not last always, that the night, no matter how long, always gives way to morning, that the storm, no matter how fierce, always passes, and that those who refuse to give up, those who refuse to let go of faith, will one day look back and see that every struggle, every hardship, every moment of doubt was shaping them into something unshakable. Life is a teacher that does not ask for your readiness before it hands out the lessons. It does not wait for you to feel strong before it calls you to endure. It does not soften its grip when you are already struggling to breathe. And in those moments, when the weight of existence presses down, when fairness seems like a fairy tale told to children but abandoned in reality, it is easy to let doubt creep in. It is easy to wonder if faith is just another illusion, another empty promise spoken by those who do not know true suffering. But faith is not a promise that life will be easy. It is not a guarantee that hardships will pass you by if only you believe hard enough. Faith is what keeps the broken heart beating, what keeps the weary soul standing, what allows the shattered spirit to gather its pieces and move forward. It is not about avoiding suffering. It is about outlasting it. It is about standing in the storm and refusing to let it drown you. There was once a man who carried more burdens than most. He had lost his family to tragedy, his home to misfortune, his dreams to disappointment. He had prayed for relief, had asked for mercy, had pleaded for a break, but none came. And so one night he sat alone, looking at the stars, asking the question that had burned in his soul for years: why? The sky did not answer, the stars did not shift, the silence stretched, heavy and unyielding. But as he sat there, a realization settled into his bones. Faith is not about receiving answers. It is about moving forward without them. It is about trusting that there is meaning even when you cannot see it. It is about choosing to keep living, keep hoping, keep believing, even when the reasons to do so feel impossibly small. And so he rose. Not because the pain had disappeared, not because the unfairness had been corrected, but because he understood that as long as he had breath in his lungs, he had the power to keep going. He had the power to walk forward even when the path was unclear. And sometimes that is all faith is. There will be moments in your life when the weight of the world feels unbearable, when loss shakes you to your core, when betrayal steals the air from your lungs, when suffering makes you question everything you thought you knew. And in those moments, you will have a choice. You can let the unfairness of it all consume you, allow bitterness to take root, let despair wrap its fingers around your heart, or you can stand. You can say, I do not understand this, I do not like this, but I will not let this destroy me. Because there is a difference between being wounded and being defeated. There is a difference between being broken and being beyond repair. The human soul is resilient. It bends, it cracks, it suffers, but it does not have to shatter. It does not have to give in to the darkness that life sometimes brings. There was a woman who had suffered more than most. Life had taken from her without mercy. She had buried her children, had known hunger so deep that it ached in her bones, had felt the sting of betrayal from those she trusted most. And yet when she spoke, there was no bitterness in her voice, no anger in her eyes, only wisdom, only a quiet, unshakable strength. When asked how she had endured, how she had held on, when life had given her every reason to let go, she simply smiled and said, "Because I chose to." That is the secret. That is the truth that so many fail to see. Faith is not about feelings. It is not about waiting until you are strong enough, hopeful enough, certain enough. It is about choosing, even in the midst of doubt. It is about holding on, even when everything in you wants to let go. It is about saying, this is unfair, this is painful, this is not what I wanted, but I will not be destroyed by it. And when you make that choice, something remarkable happens. The storms do not stop, but you find that you can withstand them. The burdens do not vanish, but you find that you are strong enough to carry them. The pain does not disappear, but you find that it does not define you. There was an old man who had lived long enough to know what it meant to suffer. He had seen wars, had lost loved ones, had watched as everything he built crumbled before his eyes. And yet, when he spoke, there was no despair in his words, no resentment in his heart, only the quiet confidence of a man who had learned that suffering does not have the final say. When asked how he had survived, how he had managed to keep his faith when life had been so unkind, he simply said, "Because I have seen what happens when you do not." He had seen what bitterness does to a person. He had seen how it turns the heart cold, how it steals joy, how it locks people in prisons of their own making. And he had refused to let that be his story. He had chosen faith, not because life had been fair to him, but because he had learned that faith was the only thing strong enough to carry him through life's unfairness. And that is the choice that each of us must make. We cannot control what life takes from us. We cannot control the storms that come, the losses that break our hearts, the betrayals that leave scars. But we can control how we respond. We can control whether we let the unfairness of life destroy us or strengthen us. We can control whether we let suffering make us bitter or make us wise. Faith is not about perfection. It is not about never struggling, never doubting, never feeling the weight of the world pressing down on you. Faith is about refusing to surrender. It is about standing in the midst of hardship and saying, "I will not be broken by this." Because no matter how unfair life is, no matter how much it takes, no matter how hard it tries to shake you, there is something within you that cannot be taken. There is a strength in you that life cannot steal. There is a fire in you that no storm can put out. And if you hold on to that, if you hold on to faith, even when everything in you wants to let go, you will find that you are stronger than you ever imagined. You will find that even in the deepest darkness, there is still light. You will find that even in the greatest suffering, there is still hope. Because faith is not about waiting for life to be fair. It is about choosing to keep going, even when it is not. It is about believing, not because the road is easy, but because you know that no matter how hard it gets, you will not be defeated. It is about trusting, not because the pain disappears, but because you know that pain does not get the final word. And when you come to the other side of your suffering, When you look back on all that you have endured, you will see what so many before you have seen, that faith was never about making life perfect. It was about making you unshakable. It was about giving you the strength to rise again and again, no matter how many times life tried to knock you down. Life will try to teach you that surrender is the only way forward. It will whisper in your ear that the weight is too heavy, that the pain is too deep, that the suffering is too much to bear. It will tell you that faith is foolish, that hope is wasted, that belief in something greater is nothing more than a fairy tale. And if you are not careful, if you are not rooted in something deeper than circumstances, you will begin to believe it. You will begin to see the world not through the lens of possibility, but through the narrow view of despair. But despair is a lie. It tells you that what you see is all there is, that what you feel now will never change, that the weight you carry will never be lifted. And yet history will show you that those who have endured the longest nights have also seen the brightest mornings. Those who have been brought to their knees in suffering have also risen to their feet in triumph. Those who have lost everything have found that they were never truly empty, only being prepared for something greater. There was once a woman who walked through life with hands calloused by struggle, with feet that had traveled through valleys so dark that most would have turned back. She had been knocked down more times than she could count, had been told no more times than she could remember. She had been given every reason to give up, to let go, to stop believing, and yet she did not. When people asked her how she had survived, how she had held on when life had been nothing but hardship, she did not speak of miracles or sudden blessings. She spoke of choice, the choice to keep moving even when her legs ached with exhaustion, the choice to keep loving even when her heart had been shattered, the choice to keep believing even when faith felt like a distant memory. She had learned that faith is not about what you feel, but about what you choose to do in spite of how you feel. And that is what so many fail to understand. Faith is not a shield that keeps suffering away. It is a fire that keeps you warm in the coldest of nights. It is not an escape from hardship, but a strength that carries you through it. It is not a magic trick that makes pain disappear, but a steady voice that tells you, even in your darkest hour, this is not where your story ends. There was a man who had lost everything, his home, his family, his dreams. He had spent years building, years believing, years working toward a future that was snatched away in a single moment. And as he sat among the ruins, he felt the weight of it all pressed down upon him, the suffocating voice of unfairness whispering that he had nothing left to hold on to. But as he looked around, as he took in the destruction, he noticed something. The foundation of his home still stood. It was cracked, yes, it was weathered, worn by time and trouble, but it remained. And in that moment, he understood something that he had never understood before. Life could take many things from him. It could strip him of comfort, could steal what he had built, could force him to start again, but it could not take away what was rooted deep within him. It could not take away his will. It could not take away his faith. It could not take away his decision to rebuild. And so he rose. He wiped the dust from his hands. He steadied himself, and brick by brick he began again. Because faith is not about whether life is fair. It is about what you do when it is not. There will be times when your strength is tested in ways you never imagined, when the weight of disappointment, of betrayal, of heartbreak presses down so heavily that you wonder if you will ever be able to stand beneath it. There will be moments when the darkness feels endless, when the road ahead looks like nothing but sorrow. And in those moments, you may ask yourself, why should I keep believing? Why should I hold on to faith when life has only given me reasons to let go? And the answer is this: because faith is the one thing that life cannot take from you unless you give it away. It is the one thing that suffering cannot destroy, that pain cannot erase, that loss cannot diminish. It is the quiet whisper that reminds you, even when everything else falls apart, that you still have a choice. There was a man who had once been known for his laughter, for his joy, for the light he carried wherever he went. But life had stolen that light from him. Loss had dulled his laughter. Hardship had buried his joy, and betrayal had turned his heart cold. He had convinced himself that faith was for the naive, that belief was for the foolish. He had decided that life was nothing but survival, that love was nothing but a risk, that hope was nothing but an illusion. But one day, as he walked through a city filled with strangers, he heard something: laughter. Not the forced laughter of politeness, not the empty laughter of people pretending to be happy, but the full, rich, unguarded laughter of a child. And for the first time in years, he felt something stir in his chest, because in that child's laughter, there was no fear, no bitterness, no cynicism. There was only joy, only life. And in that moment, he understood something. Life had not taken his faith. He had given it away. He had allowed pain to steal what was still his to hold. And so that night he sat in silence, and he made a decision. He would not let suffering define him. He would not let loss be the only thing that shaped him. He would hold on to faith, not because life had been fair to him, but because he refused to let life make him someone he was never meant to be. And that is the truth that so many before you have learned, that faith is not about avoiding hardship, but about surviving it. It is not about never falling, but about getting back up every single time. It is not about whether or not life is fair. It is about refusing to let the unfairness of life steal your spirit, your hope, your belief in something greater than what you can see. Because no matter how long the night lasts, the morning always comes. No matter how deep the wound, healing is always possible. No matter how heavy the burden, strength is always within reach. And if you choose to hold on to faith, even when life gives you every reason to let go, you will find that you are stronger than you ever imagined. You will find that suffering does not last forever, that pain does not have the final word, that even in the deepest darkness, light still exists. There is something inside of you that cannot be broken, something that no suffering can destroy, that no loss can take away. And if you hold on to that, if you refuse to let go of faith, even when everything else crumbles, you will come to see what so many before you have seen, that trouble does not last always, that sorrow does not have the final say, and that those who endure, those who believe, those who refuse to be defeated will one day look back and realize that every hardship, every struggle, every moment of doubt was shaping them into something unshakable. Faith is not about escaping hardship, but enduring it. It is not about fairness, but resilience, not about answers, but perseverance. Life will take without asking, wound without warning, and challenge without mercy. But faith is the choice to rise despite it all, to trust when understanding fails, to believe when reason falters. It is not the absence of doubt, but the refusal to surrender to it. The world will shake you, but it cannot break what refuses to bend. The night may be long, but morning always comes. Suffering does not have the final word. Faith does. And those who choose to hold on, who choose to believe when life gives them every reason not to, will find themselves standing on the other side of hardship, not just surviving, but stronger, wiser, unshakable. Because faith, even in the face of life's deepest unfairness, is what turns endurance into victory.